But that job, from the captain that unquestionably, besides my father, learning the basics growing up, the pointy end from the square end of the boat, that captain was the most knowledgeable captain I've ever worked for, and a real teacher, a quiet guy, not a screamer, not a yeller. The fishing was important. You had to be very good at it. You had to be a professional, but there was so much more than that. How we communicated. I was used to being a mate on a charter boat and the captain's yelling down at you, and maybe not even in a bad way, just yelling, your grass on the left short, where, with Dennis, there was a system to everything. He never yelled. Dennis we had a code for him tapping his wedding ring on the helm.
This is the Tom Rowland Podcast. Fascinating stories to amaze, encourage, and inspire you in fishing, fitness, and the outdoors. And we're brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. I started this podcast as a way to connect with my friends, people that I admire and respect, and you. It has been a learning journey that's made me a better person, a better fisherman, a better father, and a better athlete. I'm so happy that you're on this journey with me, and I'd love to hear from you with show suggestions, guest suggestions, or questions. The best way to get a hold of me is through text. You can text 305-930-7346 for the fastest response, but if you prefer to email, you can send that to podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. That's a dedicated email address just for the show. If you like this show, you can show your support by posting about it on social media and tagging me. Text the link to a couple of friends that may also enjoy it, and subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you feel like I've earned it. The website is tomrowlandpodcast.com, and that is where everything lives. All past shows, you can go and listen to any show. You can look up all the different shows that we've done, both the How To Tuesdays, the full links, and the physical Fridays. They all live on tomrowlandpodcast.com. And the social media is Tom_Rowland, ROWLAND, on Instagram, or you can go to our big account, Saltwater_Experience. I hope to hear from you soon. So now let's get on to today's show.
I'm Toby Hansen, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
Toby, how are you, man?
Good, man. Good to see you, Tom.
You too. It's been a while.
It has been a while. Yeah, I think the last time I saw you was at ICAST last year.
Yeah. And at least we had one. So what have you been up to?
Geez, I don't know where to start. I'm having fun.
Yeah, you are having fun? Well,
I'm having a lot of fun. So I've finally reached that stage in life after 30 years of scratching and working hard and doing the things that I love, that I'm doing some playing now. So hustling and working on 3 or 4 different fronts, but maybe
definitely
we should playing and having a lot lot of fun as well.
Maybe we should catch up a little bit. So I first met you when you were working as what would you say, a mate, or what were you?
Yeah. In fact, fairly low on the totem pole in that operation at the time. Third mate had just started in that operation. Big mothership operation on the Sarah Beth, working for Dennis Merton. Really the breakout job of my career, if you will.
Boy, what a beautiful boat that was, and a beautiful operation.
The direction of my whole career.
How'd you get that job?
My whole life has been a series of lucky breaks. I think they all originated from hard work and hustling and loving, being absolutely obsessed with fishing. Starting from a young age. My father being a commercial fisherman, but and that was where it all started. But I had a series of just lucky breaks in the fishing industry. My father was a commercial fisherman growing up. My uncle as well. My uncle did a lot of sword fishing.
And
my father was more of my father was more of a bottom longliner, tile fish, snowy grouper, stuff like that. And all I knew by the age of 16 or 17 was that was not what I wanted to do for a living.
Would you
I
go
was-
out with them
oh
occasionally?
yeah,
Yeah, a lot.
from a very young age. You know, my biggest pride or thing I was the proudest of as a teenager was, you know, at 14, 15 years old, I was making a share, you know, same as a grown man, you know,
Yeah.
fishing with my dad.
So you
In the
got to do
summer
grown man
times.
work to get a grown
Yeah,
man
that's
share,
right.
right?
That's exactly right. It was not easy work. I loved it, especially spending that time with my father, because my father was a commercial fisherman. He was gone a lot, you know, when I was younger. And so I craved that time with him, that man time on the boat, and doing something that we loved, you know, fishing. And it didn't matter what kind, you know, and summer breaks, holidays, you name it. If there was a 3-day holiday, you know, from school, my father would plan a trip around it where I'd get to fish with him. And I, you know, growing up where I did in Cape Canaveral, the son of a commercial fisherman, back then there was no talk about college or anything like that. It was, well, you can carry on the family, you know, tradition and be a fisherman, or you better learn a trade, son. Go learn how to weld or something. And none of that was really what I wanted to do. I was fortunate enough growing up on the water at that age to see there was a little bit, you know, in Cape Canaveral where I grew up, there was a little bit of sport fishing in there. There was one charter boat, you know, back there, what I thought was a monster boat, you know, a 50-foot Hatteras at the time. And I had a vague idea that people got paid to go fishing and got paid whether they caught fish or not.
What a
And
concept.
yeah, it was a novel concept at the time. But not really knowing how to get into that at a young age. There wasn't a big market there in Cape Canaveral where I was growing up. I think there was one charter boat, you know, at the time, late 70s, early 80s, you know, and not really knowing how to get into it, and knowing that I didn't want to be a commercial fisherman. I ended up joining the Coast Guard. That was the other thing I saw in Cape Canaveral. Some kids grow up, you know, seeing police and firefighters and think that's what I'll do. Well, I saw Coast Guard cutters every day when we left. And they were a great bunch of guys. You'd get to know them. There was a few instances growing up on my dad's boats where, you know, we needed them. You know what I mean? I know my father had a mate get hurt one time and needed the Coast Guard. And so the idea was to join the Coast Guard, figure out how to get my captain's license while I was in the Coast Guard, and get out and somehow figure out how to get into the sport fishing industry, you know? And that was exactly what I did. It went by plan. I got really lucky and got stationed at some really neat units, a buoy tender in Guam, which was just wonderful. I had a surfboard. The captain on that ship was incredible. I had a surfboard above my rack everywhere we traveled to tend buoys throughout the Pacific, Guam and Saipan and Tinian and all the way to the Philippines. I got to surf. We fished. We trolled, you know, the places we went. And then when I left there, you know, I went to Miami and got to do some hotshot stuff, a lot of migrant interdiction, narcotic interdiction, search and rescue.
What year was that?
I was in 89 to 94.
So that, I mean, like on Netflix, it's pretty popular these days to see the Cocaine Cowboys show and the Narcos show. And that's like right at the tail end of that, right?
Yeah, and some of that was going on.
Yeah,
you know, while we were there, I wasn't a huge fan of all the narcotic interdiction. I didn't join with the aspirations of being law enforcement. I was young, and I volunteered for everything, and I was gung ho. So we got to do a lot of that. You know, we definitely got our share of narcotic busts, cocaine busts, and stuff like that. But what turned me on was the search and rescue and helping people. And that's you know, you're not getting multiple calls a day usually for that kind of search and rescue. So when the migrant interdiction stuff started popping off the summer of 93, I believe, Castro opened the doors again, very similar to Mariel. It was a really exciting time. You know, we spent months based out of Key West on 3 day on, 3 day off rotations where you didn't sleep for 3 days. You were literally going from one raft to the next and pulling hundreds of people, you know, out of the water. It was exciting. I was the shipboard EMT. So got to see a lot of neat, and fascinating stuff that kept you entertained and kept you excited, with that. I knew it wasn't a career. It was kind of funny. I'm selling my house right now.
Yeah.
And in the process of moving, and I'm finding all kinds of neat stuff as I unpack or pack everything, from a home I've been in for almost 20 years. Found a paycheck from back in those Coast Guard days, and it was like $180 a week. I think I was getting paid at the time. So yeah. But at any rate, I ended my career there in Miami, Coast Guard District 7. Spent a lot of time down in Guantanamo and doing the migrant thing and search and rescue. And it was great. Really enjoyed it. But I wanted to get out and go fishing, which, got lucky. At the time frame I got out, I was we moved up to Palm Beach. I knew a little bit about that area from being a kid and pulling in and out with my dad when I was younger. So knew Sailfish Marina, that in my mind at the time was basically the epicenter of the sport fishing world, because that was what I knew.
Yeah.
And I got out and just started pounding the docks there, trying to get freelance work, as a mate. And it was a tough time. There was 3 or 4 families there, famous boat captains, like Alan Fields, who had 3 sons that were all very good fishermen, and if your last name wasn't Fields back then, you had a hard time getting a job in that marina. But I got a lucky break and hustled. At the time, the very first boat that I got to fish on was for a female captain out of Sailfish Marina. Her name was Debbie Beliveau, and ended up picking me up for a half-day trip. And, summertime, slow fishing, bonitas and cudas, nothing that exciting, but at the end of the day, she left me to clean up the boat, and her teak was looking a little rough, and ran to the hardware store and got some sandpaper and wet sanded her deck and oiled her teak for her, and that got me more trips. And that had people around the dock, other boat captains that saw me hustling, that would give me trips. People back out, they'd book an extra last minute trip. And so I had a couple of years of just freelance mating between that area, Sailfish Marina, the next inlet up, Jupiter out of Seasport, jumping off and on a lot of boats there, and ended up getting a lucky break with a boat captain named Donald Merton, who's no longer with us. He passed away a few years ago, but phenomenal boat captain, did a lot of world record fishing, has the only 100-to-1 record with IGFA. I believe.
What is that? 100-to-1?
It was a 600 and change pound blue marlin that they caught on 6-pound test.
Wow, that's incredible.
Pretty amazing. And I got an opportunity to help him deliver a boat, an old Monterey, down to Panama, and got to do a trip with him and his crew. And they needed an extra watch stander, and I just happened to be on the dock and free, and got to do a little bit of fishing with him down there, and just hustled. Everything that my father instilled in me: be the first one up, be chamois in the boat when everybody wakes up. That little bit goes so far, And Donald Merton was Dennis Merton's brother. And he ended up telling me that his brother, who, ran this big mothership operation for this wonderful family, was in need of another mate, and that I would get to learn a lot. And I got home from Panama and went and interviewed with Dennis and got the job. And that was undoubtedly the job that set my career. I was going in a direction of just wanting to catch 2,000 billfish a year, like some of the hotshot guys that I was seeing around the docks, the Chip Schaefers and the Archies and those guys. And this definitely took me in a different venue. We did everything, Dennis. When I got on that boat, the first trip I think I did with him was to Mexico for a few months. When you're catching your 400 or 500, sailfish there, but just about the time that would get old and you got tired of rigging, a few hundred ballyhoo a day and doing that program, it was time to leave for, the backside of the Abacos, the marls, and we go bonefish for a few months. We come through the Keys that April, May time of year when I met you and trying to put the boss on permit and tarpon and all that. So it created an opportunity for me to fish and work for undoubtedly one of the best captains in the industry, and become a well-rounded fisherman. That ended up becoming more important to me than anything else. There's pros and cons to that. You go somewhere for a few months, Central America, and you go try and fish a tournament against a guy that's all he does, is catch billfish, and he's catching his 1,000 fish a year. Good luck, you know what I mean, fishing against that guy. But on the same token, I got to become and learn from some of the best in every avenue of fishing that we could do, whether it was flats fishing, the blue water stuff, being in these different locales where we could deep drop just to put fish in the freezer, for the boss, getting to free dive everywhere we went. One of my biggest passions that I grew up doing, with my dad in the Bahamas when I was a kid. That really set the tone for my whole career, working for a captain like Dennis that all I had been working on was charter boats at the time. And not knocking that, but making that jump from charter boats and fishing on a different boat every day to the private sector, the type of clientele you were working for, the type of fishing we were doing, where money was no object.
Right.
At the end of a day of fishing on the Sarah Beth, you weren't straightening out and trying to save some 6-wire from that day, from that day of charter fishing, or trying to clean up hooks and save them. It was you had the best of everything, for no matter what you were doing, whether you were offshore fishing, fly fishing.
Yeah, that operation. I don't know how anyone could find a better operation than that. Like, I was lucky because to be part of that too, because like Simon Becker was the guide for Mr. Gottwald.
Yep.
And then there were going to be others. And so he says, well, just kind of like you, somebody refers you over. Simon referred me over. Yeah. And I remember that morning so well. I go over there and I'm like, I wonder where this boat is. And I'm looking around and I'm like, nah, probably not that one. Probably not that one. Then I'm like, could it possibly be that one? That is the nicest boat I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. Get a little closer. And you're like, yeah, come on in. The boss isn't here yet, but, make you breakfast. And it was one of the best things ever, man. I got there a little bit early, then get up there. The chef makes breakfast. We sit down, and I'm like, okay, what's going on? It's like, well, the boss is coming in, and then you see a plane come over, and then another one. And it's like, that's them. I was like, really? Wow, that's amazing. This is the nicest operation I've ever seen.
That was 2 separate Gulf Streams, because the owner of that boat and his brother weren't allowed to fly on the same plane. The corporations and the businesses that they owned and ran wouldn't allow them to fly together in case there was an accident of some sort.
Everybody needs 2 Gulf Streams. I mean,
so they'd fly in on different Gulf Streams. But that job, from the captain that unquestionably, besides my father, learning the basics growing up, the pointy end from the square end of the boat, that captain was the most knowledgeable captain I've ever worked for, and a real teacher, a quiet guy, not a screamer, not a yeller. The fishing was important. You had to be very good at it. You had to be a professional, but there was so much more than that. How we communicated. I was used to being a mate on a charter boat and the captain's yelling down at you, and maybe not even in a bad way, just yelling, your grass on the left short, where, with Dennis, there was a system to everything. He never yelled. Dennis we had a code for him tapping his wedding ring on the helm as he went along. A whole different language, quiet, Now
that's all because he doesn't want to interrupt the owner's time, and he's being so respectful of that. Doesn't want to be a screamer. Or is that just who he was?
That's just who he was. Never make you look bad, in front of the boss. A very not a pushover. Definitely, there was a right way to do it and a wrong way, and we would talk about it later. But never yell at you in front of the boss. The quieter, this is 30 years ago almost. So nobody was wearing Maxon, headsets, back then, and just talking to each other. A lot of times you were yelling over the wind or anything else. And on a big day, if you were getting 30 or 40 shots, you'd be hoarse by the end of the day.
Yeah.
If you So part of it was just looking professional. Part of it was not interrupting, the boss. If he was on the boat half the time, you'd have somebody on the boat that he might be talking business with. And that was a huge learning curve for me, learning when to interject, when to entertain, and knowing when to just be quiet and let them talk business. That was a big learning curve, when you got on there. But the other neat thing, more than just learning from a captain like that, getting on an operation of that size. The day I fished with you, I knew what a permit was. I also knew that I had poled and tried to put people on quite a bunch with zero success, and I learned more in that day, of fishing with you, for permit, the day I got to go fishing with you. We should probably tell people how I ended up fishing with you like that.
Yeah, because it was maybe the best day of, I don't know, I would say for me, it was awesome because I was like all nervous that I was going to have this super big shot, and then they didn't show up for whatever reason, right? And so we get to go. And
yeah, so we would book.
God, dang, I'm getting paid for this.
We're traveling all over the world, and you're going to all these places. And one thing I loved about Dennis, as good a fisherman as he was never intimidated, or his ego didn't get in the way of showing the boss the best time. If we would go anchor up on, say, the backside of the marls, the south side of the abacos there, to bonefish, we'd always hire a local guy, to come out, and sometimes the boss would want one of his guests to go with the local guy who's, going to do a little bit better than us. It's his home water. He fishes it every day. We're there 2 months out of the year, but everything that comes with hiring a local person wherever you go, local knowledge, something as simple as just getting bait in the Keys, where to go get bait in the Keys. You could spend a few days trying to figure that out if you have,
absolutely,
if you're not down there very often, and you pull in and you hire a local guide, and maybe you're fishing bait on the bridges. He didn't do a lot of that. He was more of a fly fisherman, but you'd get that local knowledge, out of a guide. And so we tried to use a local guy everywhere we went. And sometimes if the difference in the fishery was, exponentially better, you're going to get way more shots going with the local guy than with us. We'd send the boss, with a local guy. The cool thing about that is you would book this stuff way in advance. In January, we'd be calling and booking Simon or you, for a few days of permit fishing. And then the boss's schedule, more often than not, would get altered, and he might not be able to come in. Well, the only way you're going to keep good guides, local guys, is to pay them, whether you go or not, and if the boss can't show up for whatever reason, if it gets bumped a day, weather, you still pay those guys, and if we happen to be sitting there and it's a situation where the boss didn't make it in that day and we're going to pay you to go fishing anyways, well, by God, we're going to jump on and go with you,
right?
And that was Dennis's idea that day. Dennis could have gone with arguably one of the best permit guides in the Keys, which in my opinion means one of the best permit guides in the world. But he sent one of his young third mates, go learn something, just shut up and watch and learn, and we did. We pulled away from the dock that day. It's funny, all the thousands and thousands of hours I have fishing, there's entire days that I don't remember. My kids laugh at me. I'll bump into somebody in a Publix somewhere and Toby, and it's clear I have no idea who this person is, and you don't remember me? We caught a 500-pound blue marlin together, and I'm, oh, you're the one. But I remember that day clearly. It was blowing 20 to maybe 25 that day, and I was bummed because I'm finally getting to jump in a boat and go fish, and get to learn a little bit, and the wind's howling. And I voiced that opinion to you when we got in the boat and started to pull away, and you were like, "Man, the wind is our friend,"
That's right.
And it really lined me up for a career of flats fishing. To look at things that way, not how is this going to hurt me, but how is this going to help me?
Right.
We ended up catching a permit on the fly that day.
Yep.
And I got to do that all over the world,
That's so cool.
Go to places in the Bahamas and jump in with that local guy that taught me more about bonefish, Thinking about an old guide who's passed now, O'Donnell McIntosh, on the backside of the Abacos. To get those lessons, it was an incredible experience, whether it was in Central America where we were bill fishing, or the flats, or that kind of stuff, in the Keys. It was, and it set me up for, after fishing with Dennis for that long, and that operation to that level, most folks end up getting to a level where, all right, I want my own operation. I want to go do this now. There's certain fisheries I like, there's certain fisheries I'm not that excited about. And I'd love to set up an operation and get with the right owner to go do this. And I ended up doing that. And, Dennis still works for the Gottwald family. That's few and far between in this business, to have a job that's, he's got to be pushing 30 years.
Yeah, for sure.
There's very few jobs in the industry that the job lines up for that long, that the people stay in the industry that long.
And they stay interested in fishing that long.
Stay interested in it that long.
Anything can happen. Lots of people get way into anything. They might get into golf for 10 years, and all they do is play golf. And then one day they're just like, I don't really want to play golf anymore.
One of the operations that I ended up running, when I left, a mothership type operation. We had a great run for 4-5 years. Then the fella got into racing, you know what I mean? And just completely, well, that was fun.
Yeah.
And I rolled right into the next one. Like I said, I've been extremely fortunate and lucky to work for some great owner in an entire career of traveling hard and running boats. There was one operation that I got on that wasn't the best, that I'm not still great friends with, still talk to, that's why the Gottwald family, with the Sarah Beth, was such a great operation. Mr. Gottwald's sons, his grandkids now, love using the boat and still fish hard, and, and they go hard. But all the boats I ran after I left that were mothership operations, not to that level, that size, but still doing a little bit of everything all year long. You know what I mean? Left them to go work on a 84 Hatteras. We had a flat skiff, on deck, and we towed around a 34-foot venture everywhere we went, and got to do just a little bit of everything. Got to do the things that we love, to do. And it was amazing. The only reason I really, and I think this is true for most people that end up in that part of the industry, traveling the world and fishing, on operations like that. When you're young and you're just addicted to it, which is the only way you make it, the hours are so long and you're gone for so long, that you don't think about the future. You just think, this is the most amazing thing in the world.
Right.
And I'm getting paid great money, and I'm getting to see the world, and I'm traveling, and I'm getting to see, I'm going from one phenomenal fishery to the next. But at some point, you end up married, and at some point you end up having children. And then it dawns on you, I can't be gone 8-9 months, out of the year. And so, I had to make that transition that so many of my friends, have had to make, where once you've traveled hard like that and seen the best of it, it's so hard to scale back. You end up trying to run a smaller boat that maybe isn't a mothership operation, that only travels a few months out of the year. And it never really works for the guys that traveled really hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You either want to be all in and fish and be going to the best places, you can go, or try something, different.
So how did you make it work?
Well, I ended up not traveling. I have 2 daughters, and I'm just now, after the last 10 years of not traveling hard, of doing everything I could to make it work at home, hustling. I'm just now starting to travel a lot more and do some freelance stuff. I don't know if I'll ever, now that my girls are gone away to school, I'm a lot freer, to do what I want now. I don't know if I'll ever travel full time like that again. I turned 50 here in a few weeks, and there's just too many things I want to do, and it's too consuming,
Yeah.
So I do a lot of stuff, on the side now, planning trips, the occasional Bahamas trip here. My partner in the gun club that I'm a part owner in has a place and keeps his boat down in Costa Rica. doing trips like that. But to initially be home, raise my children, and not travel anymore when all I've known, my whole life was fishing. It required a lot of hustle. I started an inshore, guiding business here in Georgia, primarily going after, the tailing redfish up in the grass on the big tides, and then filling in around that. There's a good low tide fishery here. But in the wintertime, when it was really good, January, February, March, when it was cold, you couldn't get a lot of people to go do that fishery. You know what I mean? And so you end up doing odd jobs here and there where you can. There was a couple of plantations here, quail plantations, and I got into guiding for quail those few months out of the year that, I couldn't get people to come and put on a ski jacket, to go fishing.
Right.
Got into, doing a lot of duck hunting, guiding, and ended up, making it work. A little bit of commercial fishing, a little bit of commercial spearfishing. And by the time you have your guided trips in the grass, you only have, a half a dozen of those a year that are guaranteed to be big enough, to definitely see fish and show people a lot of fish. It was just a lot of hustle. Come tournament season, I'd still travel, you go up and fish the Big Rock or go down and, fish some billfish tournaments down in Costa Rica, things like that. But you're only gone for a couple of weeks, and you come home and daddy's back and, not going anywhere for
it's a big difference. It's a big difference.
Huge difference, but made it work, and throughout the time, came up with, another business idea of this gun club, that I'm a part owner in. But the funny thing about it is everything I have, even this gun club, it all came from fishing. My partner in the gun club was a gentleman that I worked for. He ended up 20 years ago, hired me to run his boat during some tournaments, and we became really good friends, and we fished together. And I ended up coming up with this idea for this little town that we live in, a sporting club, with rifle ranges and tactical bays and all of your sporting clays and skeet, and it has just evolved into something really big. But I wouldn't even have this if it wasn't for fishing.
Right.
Everything I have in my life came from fishing.
That's awesome. So one thing I want to ask you is, I just there's two things that are in my mind. One is that painting behind you, which we're going to talk about in a minute.
Oh.
But the other is that you said something that I found so interesting. On your first day, you fish for a female captain, and you go and wet sand the teak, and that got you a lot of other opportunities, right? I mean, that's kind of how you put it. So, but when you're telling me all of these things, like, it goes back, I don't know if it goes back to that moment or if it goes back to a lot of moments like that where you put in the extra time and you put in the extra effort. And I'm sure that there was a moment there where you were like, or maybe there was, I don't know, you tell me. But when you're like, man, that teak looks terrible, I guess I could run to the hardware store or not. And you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's a major moment for a young man.
It without a doubt, that came from my father. My father's very old school, strong, silent type, and work hard and it'll pay off. Which is, I have mixed feelings on that, because I've met people my whole life all over the world that work very hard and never get a break. So there's something more to it than that, but you got to have that work ethic first. You've got to have that hustle first, and then hopefully you get a break. And I've just been extremely lucky and blessed my whole life that those breaks they've come.
You've had a lot of breaks, but you also create a lot of breaks. Yeah,
I think that's the key. Hard work in and of itself, does it always pay off? For some people it does. Like I said, there's plenty of tradesmen out there that are working hard 12 hours a day and somehow never get the break. Is it a combination of hard work, a little bit of personality, and luck? Yeah, probably.
Well,
divine intervention.
You know maybe. About luck, right? Luck is the place where opportunity and hard work meet. Like,
without a doubt.
That's or hard work and
Um,
preparation. What is it? Is it hard work and preparation or hard
hard
work
work
and
and preparation.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could probably be either one, right? Like
Yeah.
hard work
Yeah. I think so.
and determination or hard work and preparation. But, you know, so many people have voiced to me that they want to get into the fishing industry, that they want to start a fly shop, that they want to start this tackle shop, or they want to leave their current job and they want to do this thing that requires passion, and they're always asking for the same piece of advice, and I always give them the same piece of advice, and it's exactly what you just said, is that, dude, find the place where you can give it the extra effort and give it the extra effort, and then keep doing that for like 20 years, and then you'll be an overnight success.
Yeah, I agree. A 20-year overnight success.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds corny because people say it so much, but my life is 100% living proof. Find something you love. Find something that you love, that you are obsessed with, and go work as hard as you can. And the caveat, you know, the add-on to that would be a good person. That goes a long way too, man. You know, being a good person, that, you know, in the industry, especially that sport fishing side, that is such a type A personality. You're already dealing with a bunch of guys like us that, you know, probably dealing with a little bit of ADD to be able to pull off, you know, what we're doing, and you're obsessed with it. And there's only so many of us doing this, you know, and the personalities are strong. And there was definitely guys that had rougher personalities that were amazing fishermen. And the names are bouncing off the top of my head right now. Phenomenal fishermen, guys with extreme talent, that were just rough around the edges and never bothered to clean up a little bit and try and not be abrasive and be a decent person. And, you know, don't yell at the boss when he misses a fish.
Ooh, that's not good.
Those were so many things that I learned on that first job, you know, the job that I met you with, where when I showed up and I was a, you know, young kid, definitely had an ego that didn't match my abilities at the time.
That's the way with a lot of young people, though, right? I mean, your ego doesn't, you know, match your abilities. That was one of the first times that I learned that there's levels to everything in life. You know what I mean? And you might be a great fisherman for where you come from or a species, you know, in your town, but then you meet guys like that, and you realize that there's different levels to this. Guys that are from the get-go, when I got on that operation, just drinking from a fire hose, you know, and you've got a captain that's trying to teach you things like fish behavior, you know, why a bonefish will react this way, but a tarpon won't, or the same thing with your billfish. You know, we're trolling and a sailfish is in the spread. We're going to treat him a lot different than a white marlin or a blue marlin or anything else. And I was still learning the basics, you know, at the time. That goes a long way. I think that not just being a good fisherman, what else comes with it? You know what I mean? The boss himself, you know, the owner of that operation, he had been fishing for 40 years. He wasn't hiring me for my fishing knowledge, you know, really understanding what my job was, and getting better at it, you know, and, you know, by the end of that job, before I left, you end up making your way up to first mate. You end up making your way to co-captain, you know, where when we take that big 98-foot, you know, burger to Mexico, and we have a 43-foot Ryko, you know, a Michael Rabovich boat, that I get to drive it down there, you know, and that's Dennis's baby. There was these gradual increases in responsibility, you know, and in trust, that shaped my whole career. So at what point do you decide to leave that job? That seems like, I mean, it's almost like that's the pinnacle, but at some point is it the travel or what?
Yeah. You know, married at the time, and with that operation, there was years with that operation that it was 9 months, you know, out of the year. Sometimes
I can certainly see that.
Sometimes you came home for a yard period, and that was your time at home.
What was that decision like to move on from that job? Because I mean, maybe we're not painting this picture as clearly as it could be, but there would be very, very, very few jobs that would be as good of an opportunity as this one. That you would be treated as well as that particular family treated the captains. That you see that there's this future in this, that they're going to all the best locations, like it's all there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you decide that, you know what, I'm needed at
I
home.
think the major deciding factor for that was money. You know what I mean? That operation was incredible. There was a captain, there was 3 mates, there was an engineer, there was a chef, there was a full-time chef, on that boat. So, after 5 years, you get to a point where you definitely reach your salary cap, and there isn't much of a future, after that financially.
Mm-hmm.
I could have made that decision and stayed with them forever. They were such good people, and I loved the job. But you're thinking about starting a family, you're married, you want to make a little bit more money. And when back then, the difference from first mate pay, to a good captain's job running a mothership operation was almost double.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it was financially.
That's got to be a hard decision, though. It really, even
hard.
with all that even the way that you just said it, yeah, it makes total sense. But that's got to be a tough decision.
To go from your only responsibility being keeping everything clean and in good order and catching fish and showing the boss a good time, to the whole responsibility being on you. When it's a mothership operation and you're going somewhere for 3-4 months at a time, depending on where you go, the majority of your food needs to be with you. You're talking about multiple freezers on deck that get put on the dock wherever you're going. Just the logistics of all of that. Believe me, when I made the jump and started traveling, what have I done?
So the captain is the captain responsible for all those logistics as well as all the fishing and everything else? I mean, the captain runs the show.
Every operation is different.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's why, I've got so many kids now that mated for me at some point that are now captains and successful, in the industry. But when they were first getting into it, it really is, don't just take the first job. Don't just jump on a boat just to get paid to fish. Now, if you're learning, fish with everybody you can. Fish as many different styles of fishing as you can. At home, when I was, growing up and learning how to fish, out of Central Florida, it was, you better get on a boat that's live baiting. Even if you prefer trolling, you better go learn how to fly a kite with, 3 baits on 2 different kites and baits out the back. And it's technical. You got to figure, fish with as many people as you can, learn as much as you can. But when it comes to being a captain and going and running your own show, you've got to jive, with the owner and their program. And every program is different. Some guys want to fish hard. Some guys want to party and fish. And if that's not your thing, it's not going to last long.
Right.
You know what I mean? That was never my thing. And I was fortunate enough in it to have made a good enough name or reputation for myself that the owners that I was attracted to and ended up meeting up with were hardcore fishermen, that wanted to go sit in places like Chub Key or the Marls, where there is no nightlife, whereas a lot of my buddies were complaining that they were getting stuck, going to Nassau for a week and they got to fish halfway down and, halfway back or whatever. Those operations, I feel like make or break you. You know what I mean? You can end up getting stuck with 1 or 2 operations that aren't necessarily your type of show. And that ends up becoming kind of what your reputation is,
right.
And it's very hard to, would I have gotten the jobs that I did running mothership operations all over the world if I hadn't have gotten that lucky break from one captain in Panama telling me to go work for his brother and ended up meeting you and everything else? I don't know. I don't know how it would have gone.
It's funny to think like that, though. I mean, it is kind of, I thought about it today. I was just talking to my wife about this opportunity that happened a long time ago. And I was just explaining it to her. And I said, I wonder what would happen if I had done that. Like there are these little right turns or left turns in your career that you take. Wonder what would have happened if you decided you weren't gonna wet sand that teak.
Yeah.
Wonder what would have
Yeah.
happened if you hadn't have, given it that extra effort a couple of times. I mean, for me, there was this one situation to where I went to my big break, which was to go to the guide school that I went to. It was just this little school. There was only one of the kind like this, and it wasn't anything super special. It was just the only one. And at the end, the boss brings in everybody, and he says, he hands out the jobs, or just says thank you and you graduated and good luck. But there were a few
Right.
jobs. There were maybe, out of maybe 12 people that went to the school, maybe there were 4 jobs waiting for somebody that graduated. One guy went down to Utah. There was this one place, the Diamond J Ranch, which is a beautiful guest ranch. I mean, just amazing guest ranch right on the Madison River. And he pulls me into the office and he says, okay, good job. You did great in the school. You're going to go to the Diamond J. And I sat there and I had this paper in my hand and I was like, okay. And I thought about like turning around and walking out. And this was a really big moment for me because I did not ever stand up to authority. I never asked questions in class. I never, I just kind of took it. Like, whatever you say, man, it wasn't my place. But I started to walk out of there and I turned around and I was like, I'd really like to stay here and work for you. And it took everything I had to say that. Like, it doesn't seem like, I mean, I could say that today like it's nothing, but then it took everything I had to stand up for myself and just say that to him. And he goes, you would? Okay, I'll send the next guy up to Diamond J. It was that easy.
Yep.
It was that
Yeah.
easy. But that was a major point for me of just deciding that that's something that I wanted and I was going to voice this. And I didn't do that. That wasn't me before.
Yeah.
Like, to any person of any sort of authority, I would have just, okay, like, go
Yeah.
to the Diamond J. And if I had gone to the Diamond J, I do not think that I would be sitting here. Now, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened, but it would have certainly turned out differently. But it's funny to kind of think about those things. And then, when people ask if you got any regrets, it's like, certainly have things that I'm a little embarrassed about, but I don't have any regrets because everything that I've done led me to right here today.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
super happy and I'm super grateful and I'm super thankful for exactly what I have, my family, my career, my wife, all of these things I'm super thankful and grateful for. And any turn might have led somewhere else. It's
Yeah.
strange to think about,
I feel the same way, and one thing I'd love to add when we were talking about that day where I decided I'm going to go above and beyond. I'm going to hustle. I'm not going to charge her for it. I got paid my $100 to go fishing that day. I got my little tip. But I want to go again. She fishes, this boat's moving. Half the time I'm pounding these docks, this boat isn't sitting at the dock. I want to go more. And if I can do a little bit more than the last guy, hopefully she's going to call me back. And then as soon as people see you fishing and see you hustling and keeping a boat clean, that it's not a full-time job. I was freelancing then. And so when you come back in at the end of the day, most guys are, spritzing that boat off and getting out of there. They're going to make some rigs and fish on another boat the next day, taking that time to put that good wash down in, and yeah, that boat might've been fished for the last 3 days before you and not gotten cleaned up well.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to take the time to clean it and clean it right. Because I want the call back,
Right.
And the other thing I would add to that is it was a little bit more than just hard work. It wasn't that we were working hard and had a good personality and then this stuff was handed, to me. There was years when I was freelancing before I got that first job for Donald Merton going down to Panama, which led to everything, where you're just hustling, you're just fishing and you're learning. And I was doing everything from jumping on a headboat, the Miss Blue Heron, with 60 people on it. And the guy in the front hooks a bonita and the guy in the back hooks a bonita, and you're untangling that stuff. You get good at untangling stuff, every type of fishery, I could do, and I wasn't making great money, but I was happy. I loved fishing and I didn't mind working hard. At the time I had I had bought one of a used U.S. postal Jeep that had,
Nice.
I don't know if you can picture them in your mind, but it
Oh,
was
yeah.
over the box.
Oh, I know.
And there was only one seat in it. My wife's car, we'd go to dinner in and things like that. But this was my freelance mating vehicle. And on the back window, I had suction cups with wooden dowels, and I had all my wire rigs hanging from one, my fluorocarbon live bait rigs hanging from another, my trolling stuff with my sea witches, and that was another thing that separate me from all the other mates, because these guys knew if they called Toby and Toby was coming to fish with them, that he was going to show up. All right, what are we doing, Cap? Well, we're going to go troll the dolphin here. All right. I'm showing up with 24 rigs with sea witches on them and ready to go. You know what I mean? Rigging up some ballyhoo and going, using my rigs. Did I have a lot of money in that? No. But it was one more thing that these charter boat captains that are looking at the bottom line. They're, these guys are thinking about, do I run 2 more miles to that edge and burn that fuel? Mm-hmm. They're trying to save every penny they can. So I was showing up with my own rigs. I had my bait cooler in the back. I had another cooler on the side of that male Jeep where the passenger seat would have been. And that was to sell fish. Back then, at the end of the day, we did a lot of things different, 30 mm-hmm. years ago. But you kept everything that you could legally keep and go sell. And even if it was, king mackerel or cudas for $1 a pound for dog food, you were moving it, you were hustling, and you were making it all come together. So there was a lot of lean years in the beginning. When I sit here and I tell you that everything I have right now, I have because of fishing. It didn't happen overnight. To think, I just got back from Africa.
Yeah, no, we've got to talk about that before we get.
I just went on a hunting trip in Africa. Something that I'd wanted to do since I was 12, and I was reading Hemingway books and Capstick and Ruark, about hunting in Africa. And I did it through. There's no inheritance here. There's no, it's just been from fishing hard and working hard my whole life. Every aspect of my life right now, in one way, shape, or form, comes from that hardcore addiction to fishing, to wanting to figure fish out. And it didn't matter where, it didn't matter what kind of fish it was, as long as it was in the saltwater. To this day, I love going somewhere new and figuring a fishery out. I was thinking about it this week, all the fisheries that all the advances, you know what I mean? The things that we figured out that worked great and changed,
What did you think about? Because that's a question that I've been asking people lately, is of all the advances, innovations, whether it's in fishing tackle or anything else, what do you think has impacted your fishing the most in your career?
God, that's so multifaceted.
I know. There's a lot of different things.
I think more about the failures sometimes and the amount of time I put into something because I knew it was going to work. And if I just fine tune it, a little bit more, and it never worked, and it was a really bad idea, and I wasted a lot of time on them. Live baiting for swordfish. I got the bright idea that I was going to live bait for them, and I was going to get more bites, and you do. There was about a year-long period there that we would catch rainbow runners. They can take the depth, coming up and down, and man, we had some 20 bite days.
Wow.
Live bait for swordfish. Never put one in the boat on live bait. They come in swatting at it. They get hooked everywhere but where they're supposed to. And it was so hard to stop doing that because we're getting all these bites, but you'd pull hooks, you'd get them close to the boat, you'd have them jump, and you'd see that bait come flying out of his head or out of his peck, or where he's coming in trying to kill it and he's just getting tangled up. And that didn't work out that great. So there's a reason why everybody that knows anything about a swordfish is fishing strip baits and squids. It might be a quarter or a fraction of the bites, but your hookup ratio is, much better. As far as innovations, nowadays, the biggest thing most recently, as far as offshore fishing, bill fishing, that Furuno Omni sonar is just, it almost seems unfair. You know what I mean? I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's
a little bit.
Yeah, that the whole sensor, lowers down when you slow down and you're trolling. It's 360 degrees. You can see perfect conditions, they say 5,000 feet, but you can count on 1,500 to 2,000 feet. And, oh, there's the ball of bait at 2:00 at 500 feet. Let's go run them over, incredible. And the guys that are using them a lot and really know how to read it, man, I almost feel like in the tournament scenario that they need to have two divisions, one for the boats that have it and one.
Well, it's
that
interesting that that's the first thing that you thought of, because I've heard other people say that it should be illegal, and I'm like, well, why should it be illegal? Like, two divisions makes sense.
I think it's, I remember hearing that about every advancement that's come along. Does it feel a little like cheating to me? Maybe a little bit. That was part of it. That was part of the mystique of all of it, especially in places where you weren't fishing structure. If you're not off of Isla Mujeres, up on the flat and marking the bait and looking at the birds, if you're somewhere like Costa Rica, where you're just fishing current rips, there is no structure. You're fishing 2,000-3,000 feet of water, that was a lot of it. How fishy are you? Yeah. Can you figure it out? Can you get on them?
Yeah, but when you make something illegal, I don't know that it stops that. I almost think that when you make something illegal, it stops the well, I don't know. As I'm saying this, maybe I'm rethinking it, because if you make it illegal, then people figure out how to fish that same way without it or with something else. Like in the Florida Keys tournaments, a lot of times somebody would win a tournament doing something that people had never done before, and they automatically want to make it illegal. And but it's like, really? Or is that an innovation? Did you just push the sport forward? Did you, if you win a tournament with a trolling motor, then all of a sudden trolling motors are illegal? And it's like, but if you allow trolling motors, maybe eventually you'll do better without a trolling motor, like because the fish get used to it or whatever. But when when there's this knee-jerk reaction to just make things illegal in tournaments, I don't know that that's the way to push things forward or to make other innovations. Because if you use that particular sonar and you're running around and you see all this stuff, you do become more fishy, because you're like, oh, on this certain rip, they have been under here every single time that I've come by. So now I'm looking for this certain thing, and I don't have to use this radar anymore or this sonar anymore, or I don't have to use the drone anymore. But I was able to use the drone to see something that I had never seen before. And then once you see that enough,
I'm sure there'll be enough of an experience with it where you can replicate. Like for some reason, they're always on this side of the rip.
Right. Exactly.
You know what I mean? And be able to recreate that. But I don't know. For billfish tournaments,
it's pretty good. I'm not gonna. Yeah. You can't discount it.
The only limiting factor in that is I think right now they're right around $100,000. You know, put one on a boat, and I don't think you can get one inside a boat.
But come on, man, that's not a limiting factor in those circles.
No, not at all.
That's not like saying a $2,000 GPS is going to be a limiting factor in a tarpon tournament. Like,
exactly.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll take 3 of them.
Right. Yeah. To your point, I remember being a kid when GPS really first became available to the public, not just military.
Right.
And my father thinking, it's done. It's all done. Any Guggen now can just go get on, some numbers and
that's
get
before they even had a base map on it, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a blank screen with some dots on it.
That's exactly right.
I was just talking about it on the podcast I did earlier. We were talking about our first GPS, and mine was, and I probably had it on the boat the day that you and I fished together. Maybe, or maybe that was even before that, but it was the Lowrance LMS 350A. I still remember it because I would look at it and I would be like, man, that is the deal right there. If I had that thing,
is the ticket.
And then it was like this huge jump for when I built the next boat. I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm putting it in. I'm gonna put it in. I'm gonna put the GPS in. And then you get out there with it and you're like, this isn't quite as good as, I see the potential. Like if there was a map underneath here where you could see, but
Right.
that'll never happen. And then a few years later, there it is. It was
Yeah.
way better.
But when you had guys that didn't need the map, um, like people we know that were fishing the
Oh yeah,
Tortugas back then, you know
sure,
what I mean? And had a piece of structure and they could just put that dot on it and go back to it repeatedly.
yeah,
That was a game changer.
for
You know?
sure.
Yeah. In fact, interesting story. I don't know when the military actually started, like say the Navy or the Coast Guard actually started, officially switching over, and when those GPS units got on them. But I know on the first unit that I flew to when I was in the Coast Guard, after I got out of quartermaster school, navigation school, I actually carried the first GPS unit for that boat with me when I flew out there to Guam.
It was probably $300,000.
Who knows?
And your phone does about 10,000 times better job than
without
that
a
thing.
doubt. I felt like it should have been handcuffed to my case,
Yeah,
to my wrist
right.
in an attaché case that I had top secret government stuff that I was flying out there with. It's funny to see where it's come, but there's so many other fisheries now that nothing really has changed in them. It's still, you have to put your time in. You have to see the body language of those fish, and you have to miss a lot and go through that learning process, to be able to catch them. And then, as soon as you go somewhere different, and it sounds crazy, but the same fish, the difference in how those fish act, I haven't been down there in a while, but a mid 1990s shell key bonefish, compared to a bonefish in the Abacos.
Yeah.
It's not even the same species.
No, it's not. Unfortunately, those fish don't exist anymore that you're talking about, but because of the cold front. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that was it was a totally different thing. Just like a Pine Island Sound redfish up there in Fort Myers that had been getting run over by mullet boats every single day was not the same species as a fish that is in Louisiana Bayou. I mean, those fish in Fort Myers were the hardest fish of any species I've ever had to try to catch. Those fish were so incredibly spooky. The water was super clear. And I'm fishing for them. I'm like, this is a redfish. I remember we were fishing a tournament. I had to go down to like 8-pound test and a tiny bonefish fly in the middle of a big money redfish tournament. I'm like, look, this is the only thing I can get in the water that doesn't scare the crap out of these fish.
That they'll think about eating.
And they did. I caught one like that. And I was just like, this is unbelievable. And then I later found out that, all the good guys don't fish in shallow water. Like, they never go there. They fish in deeper water.
It's funny you should mention that. I've had the opportunity to watch that happen to a fishery here. When I first, how I got to the, Savannah, Georgia area, trying to slow down on my traveling. I ended up going to work for a gentleman that had a 52 Viking, didn't go as hard. And he, Savannah was home, for him. And we ended up just never leaving. But when I first got here, at the time I had an old whip ray and brought it up with me and really was just trying to learn the fishery. The idea was to slowly taper off, working for this gentleman, who his operation, he was a very hands-on owner operator, probably wouldn't normally hire a captain, for what I was going for at the time. But I knew this gentleman from fishing and rubbing shoulders with him. He owned a home down in Chub Key, and was honest with him. Man, I'm actually looking to get out of this. I'm going to start a little inshore, business at home and a couple other things to try and raise my kids and be home for them, till I can get them off to college. And it worked out great. I worked for him for 2 years, and we slowly tapered off the amount of trips I would do for him until I was starting to book 3 and 4 days a week, for my business. And then eventually, parted ways, and we're still great friends, to today. But when I first came up here with that whip ray and started scouting, and just trying to figure a fishery out, and we have really big tides here, an average tide here is 5-6 foot, and quite often it's 8-9 foot, not counting king tides and spring tides. And, you're fishing 6 to 8 days a week, where you're guaranteed for it to be over 8 foot, which is, I'll book, a charter on 8 foot or bigger. You can certainly see tailing fish on a 6.5, 7.5 foot tide, depending on the wind direction. But those, 8 foot and bigger, you're guaranteed you're going to see a lot of fish, and you're going to show somebody, give somebody a lot of shots. And when I first came up here, I'll never forget the first flooded marsh that I floated through. I saw about 100 fish tailing. You could hit them in the head and they'd tip up and eat. And over time and people figuring it out, and people moving here, there's probably 4 times the people living on the Georgia coast, as there was 20 years ago, when I first started coming up here. And the age old, it sounds ridiculous. I know nobody in the Keys wants to hear me cry about, my place getting busy, and more boats being here. But at least down in the Keys, there's a semblance of rules and how you're supposed to act, and courtesy and all that. And nobody here really knew that. And I had it to myself for a long time, going up. But the thing about these areas here that I'm fishing, if you ever go up into a flooded, area and you see some fish, that is a spot. And unless somebody comes in and kills them, and catches them and doesn't take care of them or intentionally, throws them in the cooler, it'll always be a spot. But the spots get fished out really easy here. We learned over time, me and a couple other guides, that started here about the same time. We did a lot of tagging. We really tried to learn as much as we could about this fishery. And not all redfish here on the Georgia coast go up into the grass on those high tides. It's funny, you can pretty much find a good high tide spot by running around at low tide and seeing where you're finding your big schools around the oyster shells and everything else. And these schools, they don't move, really very far. It's not until that fish is about 3 years old and hits that 12, 13 pound range that they start going offshore. So for that couple of years, they're going up in the grass, but they all certainly don't go up in the grass. And I found really quickly, we released the majority of our fish, in the early days. But every once in a while, if you had a good customer, I've got a doctor that comes with me 2 days a month, 3 days a month, every once in a while you'd catch a fish that was in that slot and he'd want to carry it home. And, I was younger, and okay, he's a legal size fish. We'll put him in the cooler for you. And some of those spots have never recovered. It only takes taking 4 or 5 fish out over the course of a year. And we figured out over time that you might have that, 2 or 3 year old fish that has it figured out. And he knows, get up in there as fast as I can, get as deep as I can to get those fiddler crabs that are on the farther back area that doesn't get flooded, as often. But before they get into the grass, they are schooled up. And so he might drag a couple of newbies, a couple of smaller fish, last year's, or this year's, year class fish in there with them. Once they figure it out, they go back. That's food. And they're dying to get up in there. You'll see them staging and just, they don't ask me how, but they know when there's going to be a big tide, right? And they're up on the edge and they're waiting to get in there, and we learned over time, I haven't killed a redfish in almost 20 years.
Wow.
Because of that. It only took a season or two to realize, man, you can wipe a spot out really quick. And if you're, for somebody to get one of those spots, even if they don't have a flat skiff, the one thing I'm lucky on here on that is the majority of those flats are really soft mud. So you don't have the guys jumping out trying to wade. They'll sink to their waist.
Right.
But you see more and more flat skiffs showing up. You see folks that, are watching you. They can sit off a few hundred yards, and if all they have to do is see you fishing there, and they've got your spot. And you see those spots, slowly getting pounded. We've watched the fish, and the fish get educated as well. You have to fish for them now. You can't hit them on the head. You got to throw it, 3 feet in front and 3 feet past, and you have to, fish properly for them. But it's still a good fishery.
Man, that is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I've been able to do that, not in Georgia, but in South Carolina. Same deal up in that Spartina grass, and it's really, really good. That's fun. Even if you only see a fish or two, it's like super fun. And
Yeah.
the way I did it, we got out and waited, and it was harder bottom, and you could sneak up on this fish that's like in this jungle of grass, and it's so cool. Like the whole thing is
Yeah.
just super cool. It's one of the coolest things in all of
It's
fishing.
a really neat fishery for beginning fly fishermen. You know what I mean? I'm at a point now with, with my clientele on that. I haven't taken a new person red fishing in years. I've got my guys, and um, until one of them passes away or quits fishing,
Right.
there probably won't be an opening for that. It's only 7 or 8 days, a month, and we have evolved into everybody's, that fishes with me now. We're fly fishermen. In the early days, you need to carry trips, and so you're carrying guys that show up and it needs to be bait.
Yeah.
I need to throw some shrimp on a weedless hook for them to be able to find it. You know what I mean? But it's a neat fly fishery because it is a little bit easier. You know what I mean? You don't have to cast 60, 70 feet,
Right.
for that. You're not having to throw a 12-foot leader, for that. A fraction, of that. I can get away with a heavier tippet.
Yeah.
They just don't see it in the grass like that. So, it is a wonderful fishery for that. It's a tough fishery. A lot of times, in that really thick grass like that, it's almost impossible to make a fly weedless,
Right. Right.
enough to not get hung up in that. In fact, people laugh because I love fly fishing so much, and I've traveled the world and, have my fly tying kit that I carry with me, when we go to the Bahamas, when we go somewhere and we're trying to tie beautiful flies and all that. The red fishing flies are the ugliest things you've ever seen. The most effective ones here, people show up and they look at my fly box and I'll hand them a fly to tie on and they just look at me like, is this a joke? It's my favorite fly for the last 20 years. I buy I forget who makes it. I think Gamakatsu, but it's a weedless hook with a wire weed guard on it.
Huh.
I buy those hooks and I tie my flies on that, because that seems to be the best thing that you could literally throw in your backyard if you haven't mowed it for 2 weeks,
Right.
and drag it through it and it not get hung
like
up.
An old gold spoon had those wire
Right.
weed guards on
Exactly.
there like that.
Yeah, very similar. Big flashy ugly flies with a metal weed guard on them.
Yeah.
I'm throwing, and been throwing here forever. But if it don't work, if it does, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Right. Why would you?
Yeah.
Tell me about spearfishing.
That is I turned into my biggest passion again in life. I started out, I was super fortunate, to grow up with the father that I had. But one thing my mother made him do that assuredly, changed the future of my life was in the summertime when about 12 years old and on for about 5 or 6 seasons. In the summertime, it didn't matter what kind of commercial boat my father had. It could have been a longliner with a big spool on the back, you name it. My mother would make him take some time off and we'd go cruise the Bahamas on that commercial boat. He might pull the spool off the back deck and put a picnic table on the back deck and drag a whaler behind us, But when I was a kid, the best memories of my life, are spearing lobster and spearing groupers with my dad, in the Bahamas and snorkeling. And that was always a passion of mine. And throughout my boating career, there was plenty of opportunities in the places we'd go to before the boss got in, or even while the boss was there, just to jump in. You want some lobster for dinner, boss? All right, we'll jump in. We'll get a few lobster for you. We'll spear a hogfish, something like that. And I considered myself a good free diver. I shot a lot of fish. And back then I could dive 35, 40 feet, which was a big deal, to me, back then in my experience. I had a few mates from Mexico that were phenomenal free divers that I told stories about everywhere I went, wearing some Mickey Mouse Walmart fins that could dive 70 feet, and sit on the bottom and kill a few things. And I never really understood it. And then about 15 years ago, I had a kid that was working for me, really want to get into it. And he ended up taking a class, a freediving class, and he came back after the first weekend and told me that he had dove 60 feet. And I called BS. I said, I've been diving my whole life, son, and I'm good for 40. I don't think you quite dove 60. And then we went down to the springs and the kid did 65 feet.
Huh.
And all right, what's going on here? And ended up taking a free diving class and learning some of the fundamentals that I never learned, growing up free diving, in the Bahamas, breath hold techniques and things like that. And just got back into it with a passion. You know what I mean? Your whole life chasing fish, with flats fishing, you get to see the tarpon or the permit or the bonefish, and you get to watch their body language, and you can learn so much about that fish and their personality. There's so many other types of fish that if you're not in the water and you don't get to see them, you don't learn that. You don't get to learn the body language of an African pompano. We never see them. Mm-hmm. You'd catch one every once in a while, and you knew what they'd eat, this jig, or what situation you might catch one. The difference between a permit up on the flats and a permit in deep water. Sure. It's two different animals, and so, that got me the love of figuring fisheries out and learning so much more at this stage in life. 12, 13 years ago, my late 30s, pushing 40, to be able to be learning more about these fish that I've been chasing my whole life and was fairly effective at catching, and realize that you don't know much about them, much about their personality or anything else. And so that was the initial, man, this is so cool, getting back into it. And it is just, I'm fairly obsessive, when it comes to things, and just got into it. And I take so much joy out of it. I had about 15 years ago, I had a tank diving, a scuba accident that almost killed me.
Really?
And at the time it was, man, what am I doing? You realize later, we were diving nitrox about 120 feet up here out of Savannah, to catch big lobsters. You're catching 7-8 pound, lobsters, big thing, barnacles on their backs. And, but had a real scary incident, with some bad air, a bad mix. And if it hadn't have been for a guy diving with me that day that got his tanks filled somewhere else, I wouldn't be here. And so I quit. I'm not saying I'll never tank dive again by any means. I just haven't come up with a reason to since that, you know what I mean? But that got me back in the water, the free diving. And then all the places that I used to go that weren't that exciting to me anymore. I had the fishery dialed in, and but now I'm free diving, and yeah, let's go back down there. Yeah, I've got a friend who's got a house here, or this kid that used to mate for me is running a boat there now. And no matter where it is, Alaska, Central America, all throughout the Caribbean, going and getting to see that entirely different world. Mm-hmm. I've been to Alaska a bunch. I have a couple of guys that used to mate for me and good friends now that are captains out there. And I've gone out there and had some really fun fishing, and did a little bit of freelancing with one of my friends out there, mating for them, catching really big halibut and all that, until you get in the water, and it's a completely different world, killing the black rockfish, in the kelp, and chasing halibut and looking for ling, and then, closer inshore, spearing salmon and things like that. I'm just, I love the free diving, that's, we do a little bit of, I've got a good friend here I'm partners with, that we alternate, every other year getting our commercial dealer's license. And we do a little bit of commercial spearing, but it's mostly sport, mostly just having fun, the interaction that we have, nowadays it's always a little more exciting, especially with the shark population being what it is. I've never, it's, like I said, I'm going to be 50 here. I've spent my life on the ocean, and I've never seen sharks.
What do you, I mean, obviously there's just more sharks, right? Like, I mean, it's not like, what do you think is going on? There are more sharks. And so you have this big push for, shark protection. And somebody was asking me this the other day. They were like, oh, you shouldn't kill sharks because they're, endangered. And I was like, come fishing with me sometime, and I'll show you endangered. Like, everywhere we go, there are more than there's ever been before. And I explained it to them. I'm like, look, I don't doubt that maybe, possibly, worldwide, there is a decline in sharks, while at the same time there is a giant explosion on the coast of the United States and Florida. There, I could see how that could happen. You could have a global decline, but in certain areas, you could have way, way more.
Yeah, it's more than just the East Coast of the United States, the Caribbean,
For
Central
sure.
America. It's
You're seeing them like that in Central America too?
oh yeah, yeah. The sharks are. I've never seen anything like it, and it's tough because when you, especially in this day and age, with social media, um, and I think it comes from a good place. That there's a lot of people out there that are being told they're endangered and you should never kill a shark. You should never harm a shark in any way. Um, Come get in the water with me.
Yeah. Or
Try and put
fish.
a fish in the boat. There's so many fisheries now that it's extremely hard to put a fish in the boat.
For
You
sure.
know, um,
And
and
inshore and offshore,
yeah,
every depth of water, it can
yeah,
be really, really, really tough. And like when we're filming that Into the Blue show, dude, they are on us like a magnet. I don't
yeah.
know. It's everywhere we go, anywhere we
Yeah.
go.
With free diving, there's ways around it. If you have a good crew, you got guys that dive with you that aren't scared of sharks. You can. I very rarely lose a fish. If you've got guys that when you shoot the fish are willing to dive down and poke them off, they don't want to fight. Sharks don't want to fight for anything. If they get hurt, they die. They don't
Hmm.
have a hospital to go to. They get infections and if they're weak, they die. So they don't want to fight for anything. I don't think it's very rare that I have one that's so aggressive that poking him off, doesn't do the trick. But there's certain fisheries that I'm seeing now to put a fish in the boat, you have to have diversionary tactics. You know, there's certain fisheries that if you don't have a carcass to drop the second you get hooked up for the sharks to pile on, you don't have a chance putting that fish in the boat. And I hate to sound, what's the answer? Well, we're not killing sharks anymore. You know what I mean? And I just think that a complete ban on anything is not the way to manage a species. It doesn't matter what it is, if it's sharks or if it's the current debacle we have right now with red snapper.
Yeah.
Um, a complete closure, I don't think is ever the way to manage anything. And I think the people that think if you just leave it alone, that it'll work itself out, that's naive too. You know what I mean? So there's always been checks and balance, in my lifetime, between the Goliath groupers on the wrecks, it is no doubt changing the ecosystem. Our fishery here, speaking of red snapper, there was a wonderful fishery here, unlike anywhere else on the eastern seaboard where you have the Carolinas and you have Florida, where you have high boating pressure and you have a very small width of the depth, that red snapper live at. Let's call it whatever, 80 to 200 feet, through the whole, east coast of Florida. That's a quarter-mile, strip in an area that arguably the highest boat population, in pressure is. Did there need to be, was there a time frame where there needed to be, some regulations there? Sure. But as you come up that east coast and you get up towards, where I'm from, Canaveral, that turns into 20 miles, almost, of the right depth and the right structure, and everything else. And then when you get up here, from Jacksonville to almost Charleston, it's 90 miles, 80 miles of that right depth of, phenomenal fishery here for them. And we've watched over the last 5 or 6 years, other fisheries suffer so bad. Like, you can't go catch a legal black sea bass up here right now. Whereas, before that was your backup. If you had a day of fishing and whatever you were targeting didn't go that well, no problem. On the way in, we're going to stop. We're going to catch you a cooler full of beeliners and black sea bass and some triggers and, some other stuff, some porgies. And we have watched every one of the fisheries that I just mentioned decline dramatically here because of the red snapper.
Right.
That is an apex predator. It is nothing right now for us to go bottom fishing and to catch, 30 plus pound red snappers all day long. The footage that I have, me and a couple of my friends, we tried to break the record with the pole spear, for the last 2 years, and we've come very close. Shot some 25 pounders. But I have GoPro footage where we stop on numbers, don't even have time to start chumming yet. Just, and in some situations you can't chum anymore because of the sharks. It just becomes too hairy. But anchor up over some structure, get in the water, and within 3 to 4 minutes of being anchored and just them seeing the shadow, that boat up there, thousands of snapper, come to the surface in 160, 170 feet of water. I've got footage of hundreds, if not 1,000 mature fish, fish over 10 pounds, what are we doing?
Yeah, right.
We're managing a species along, the entire Southeast. Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, but I don't see thousands of them, but I mean, when we were in Louisiana, you go to any structure in any depth, and they're right there. I mean, like lots of them. Yeah. And the same thing. I mean, you can't keep them in all through the Keys. The Goliath grouper does show some signs of hope with an opening now, because they did kind of propose. I'm not sure if it's in yet or not, but there's been a proposal.
I've been rumblings about it. I haven't been following it that closely.
But a proposal to open it at all. And to me, opening it at all is way better than keeping it closed, because to me, that's the biggest step, is that first opening. And then you can take some steps to get more and more and more that's open. Right. But man, when it's just closed off, just like an area that's closed off, it is really, really hard to get that to reopen.
Yeah, there is. I hate ever seeing a complete closure somewhere.
Of anything. Closure of
rarely
of fish.
Ever get it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Or closure of like use. Like that's also really bad in my opinion, where you can't even fish there, or you can't even go there.
Yeah.
Well,
we've got some spots like that offshore.
On the day we fished together that we keep referencing, I probably could have taken you, and maybe even did take you, to Boca Chica Beach. And then they closed it and said, we're just going to close this for a little while, about a 15-mile stretch of Boca Chica Beach. We're going to close it off for just a little while to take some fish counts, and we'll reopen it when we see fit. Well, it's almost 30 years later. It's not reopened. Now, you and I can't go in there and throw a feather to a bonefish that we're going to release, but you can run 50 jet skis all over the place and run them up on the beach, destroying turtle grass. Yeah. But we can't go in there with a feather and throw a feather at a bonefish. Like that's
affecting the fish 10 times more, bumping those fish, pushing them out of there, disturbing their migration
So much
patterns.
of it just doesn't make sense. And but the point being is that once it closes, it is really, really, really hard, if not impossible, to get it to open up again. Not impossible. I mean, I don't like to use the word impossible, but very difficult.
It's funny because when it comes to this stuff, on one hand, I'm banging the war drum on red snapper, but in the same breath, we're doing everything we can right now, talking with DNR and fellow charter boat captains here in Georgia, doing everything we can to get the regs on redfish changed. We have watched our fishery over the last few years definitely take a beating. And there's a lot of reasons for that. There's more people here, but our limits are way too high here.
Don't you have an 18-inch? Isn't it something?
18 to 24.
24, right. I remember when we were fishing those redfish tournaments when we went to Georgia, which was a tournament that I did not fish. Rich went up there without me, and it was 24 inches, and those are very small fish. Like a 24-inch. Isn't it? Is it pinch tail? How do you measure it? So pinch tail.
Yeah, and that fish at 24 inches is just shy, depending on how fat he is, depending on how well he's eaten. But at that, he's just under 5 pounds. That 4 3/4.
Yeah, and the way they
so when you caught one that was in the slot that was 5.5 or a little bit bigger, man, that was a tournament.
Yeah,
that was a tournament.
That's a really big deal, and there's a big difference in the way that they measure. Like in Louisiana, they would do the spread tail, and a winning stringer of 2 fish in Louisiana would be, close to 24, 25 pounds.
Right.
Incredibly different. But then if you
Yeah.
do the pinch tail, which like one of the tournaments, I think it was the IFA did the spread tail, and then the ESPN did the pinch tail, and in the same place it might be a 20-pound limit would
Yeah.
be the same I mean, it's just a much smaller fish because of the way that you're
Yeah.
measuring it. But when you're measuring
right.
those fish in Georgia, that's a very small redfish, like very
It
small.
is. And the fish here, unlike Louisiana, as soon as they get out of that slot and get up, well, not as soon as they get out of that slot, but as soon as they start hitting that double digit, that 10, 11 pound range, it's pretty rare to see them in the grass or up in the shallows here. They almost always go offshore then, and we've got a lot of structure up here, some of it man-made, some of it not, in that 2 to 3 mile range offshore. And once those redfish hit that 3-year-old, I believe 3-4 years old maybe, but that 10, 11, 12 pound range, they're almost exclusively off the beach, with the exception of spring and fall for that couple of weeks when they come into breed, and everybody's chasing the bull reds, they call them. And then we get the really big fish in here. But I think in almost 20 years of before I even moved here full time, but just coming up and fishing and being in the grass, the biggest fish that we've caught in the grass was 13 and change, pounds.
Wow.
You just don't see them, that big. I don't think
It's just a behavioral change at a certain age class.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's so much bait offshore. I think when they get to that size, energy to, protein,
Right.
Is the juice worth the squeeze
Right.
on up in there
Yeah.
eating, dime-sized fiddler crabs, or do they need to be eating pogies off the beach, or when the mullet run's coming through?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a neat, unique little fishery here. But it's definitely affected, by the amount of people that live here and how much pressure, gets put on them. So we're doing everything. We're all of the guides here, and a lot of folks that aren't guides, even just, avid recreational, more than just, the guy that goes a few times a year. Everybody's fighting to get the regs fixed here, and do a
they do.
South Carolina.
A lot of enforcement agencies do seem to be more open to more protection rather than opening a season or a fish that's completely closed off, like the red snapper. I think you're going to have a better chance of getting those regulations changed. I've seen that happen. Like with a permit, it used to be one per person, right, or whatever. Right. So you get a head boat that comes out to this place, and everybody could catch one. There's 100 people on the boat. Wow. I mean, you get over the road to school, you'll catch 100 permit. Maybe those numbers are wrong or whatever, but the head boats used to be able to just massacre them. Then it changed to one per person or 6 per boat, whichever is more, or some kind of rule like that, and that made a huge difference. I mean, there's 94 permit that aren't getting killed because the boat can catch 6 now instead of 100. And when the case is made, the powers that be tend to side with protection sometimes more so than opening.
I think that depends on the state a lot.
Yeah, probably does.
Florida definitely listens. It seems to me, my perception, that Florida Fish and Game, Florida Fish and Wildlife, FWC, they listen to their biologists, and they really don't care what public perception is. If the data shows that this fishery is hurting, let's do what we have to do, to figure it out. I have to be careful how I say this, because I have a lot of friends in the Georgia DNR, that are biologists that are good people and trying to do a good job. But it seems like it's an elected position, the head of DNR, and it seems like it's a little more political here, and it's a little bit more of a popularity contest, and they certainly don't want to hear a bunch of folks, that only come down here a couple of times a year, and they want to fill coolers, and go home. They don't want to hear the backlash, from that. Right. So for this to happen, we as guides and as recreational fishermen really have to get vocal about it. We're going to have to be a little bit louder, than the occasional weekend warrior that comes down and just wants to fill a cooler. you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, a lot of what we're talking about too, a lot has to be attributed to the case that's being made, right? Like, it's up to us to make a good case. It's up to us to get to the right person. It's up to us to let our voice be heard to the right person and do it in a way that it's effective, rather than just yelling and screaming and hoping for the best, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, we have a responsibility of getting something to change. You have to communicate effectively, and you have to do that to the right person and through the right channels and at the right time. And, like, I don't know, some states may be more likely to listen than others, but we have a responsibility too.
Yeah. I think for those that are in the know, for those of us that know what this fishery was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it's our responsibility. You know, we've used it. I've made a living doing it, not just a living, the whole recreational aspect of it. God, for 10 years, if somebody canceled last minute, it was my daughters, in the boat with me.
Yeah,
going and
that's
seeing
awesome.
redfish. And so, I desperately want this fishery to be here, for a long time, not just from a financial, side of it. I have wonderful clients that have fished with me forever that are still going to go fish a high tide with me every month, whether we see 3 fish or we see 30. It's anytime you see that fish tailing up in there and in a spot that's dry land, 20 days out of the month.
Right. That's
That's
super
a neat
cool.
thing.
That's super cool.
And as far as sight fishing goes, that's about as sexy as you're going to get here in our little corner, so it's definitely something that we want to protect. I get to jump in my truck and jump on a plane or jump on a boat and go see a lot of, neat fisheries all year, every year. We have trips this year planned from Alaska to the Caribbean to Central America to the dry tortugas here in December with a friend. So it's important for me, to say, yep, I get to see all these neat fisheries. I get to travel the world now, and easily half of it is for fun, not even getting paid. You know what I mean? But I have this one really neat fishery right here in my backyard. And, for the last 3 or 4 years, it's been bothering me seeing the numbers. And, when I lived in Florida, when I was younger, I got involved with fisheries politics, and I swore I'd never do it again. It's such a polarizing, subject. And I swore I wasn't going to get back into it. Yet here I am this year with some other friends going to meetings and kind of starting to bang the war drum to do what we can on that one.
Well, good luck with it. When you see something that's important, you need to stand up and do what you can, because if you don't do it, probably nobody else will. So you got to do it.
That's right.
Hey, tell me about that painting behind you. Where'd you get that?
It's kind of funny. I forget even who the author is. It's
Chet
such a
Renison?
scratch.
Is it Chet Renison?
No, it looks like Prague.
Yeah.
But
I've seen it before.
Bought that down in the Keys 30 years ago. It's just a print.
Yeah. I know. I've seen it before. But
yeah,
I don't know why. I really don't know why that painting. I mean, I'm not an art person, and I hear people say this about art and bottles of wine and stuff like that they speak to them. But something about that painting
there's something
speak
about
to
this
me.
painting. It's I can that panga style boat that's so prevalent throughout the Caribbean and Central and South America.
You got like the storm there, and then he's got the light just right, and then he's got the old shitty engine on it, and the paint job, and there's like, I don't know what it is about that, but that just
I've told my daughters that that painting, I can almost smell it. I can almost smell the outboard running. I can almost smell they're commercial fishermen.
I mean, I'm with you,
lines
man.
up in the front.
There are very, very, very few angling artists that I get that from. Yeah. Well, I mean, they can catch it, and it's accurate and beautiful and good, but art is like, it's something that It speaks to you or it doesn't. Like it, and maybe it's just
Yeah.
a memory that we have of like the Bahamas or Mexico or
Yeah.
Honduras or someplace where it looks like that's like set there, but it's also the storm that's out there, and it's like they're both looking at that storm like, damn,
The feeling of all of them.
we really don't want to go
Yeah.
lobstering right
There's a
now, but
couple of
here we go.
right. There's a couple of Vaughn Cochrans
Yeah.
that do that for me.
Peter Corbin is
Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
long been one of my favorite ones, and there's some others like I got this permit behind me that's Martinez, and this was one of
Yeah.
his first things that he ever did, and that's an original that was for the first
Nice.
Del Brown permit tournament, first one ever, and luckily we didn't win the tournament. We got second place because that
You got that.
or biggest
Yeah.
fish or second place or something, I don't know, but that was way better than what you got if
Yeah.
you won, and
Yeah.
that's one of my favorite because the light hits it just right. I mean, he just has it so nailed. And I don't know, Peter Corbin does that, but that one behind you.
I don't know if you've seen. There's a Vaughn Cochran of a couple of guys. They're tarpon fishing. They're staked out down in the Keys.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a couple of yellow, looks like Grundon raincoats on,
Yes.
and there's a squall passing over them, and they're just waiting the squall out till they
Yeah.
can see again.
Yeah. You know who else is good is Derek
I
DeYoung.
feel that one.
Have you ever seen
Yeah.
Derek DeYoung? He's got a very interesting style. I love him as a person, and his stuff is really good. But there's one in particular that's very, very similar to that, and it looks to me like it's Spanish Harbor Bridge, and there's some people waiting out. There's this big storm coming, and they're just like trying to get this last fish before the storm comes, and everything about it is just like, man, I've been there 1,000 times, and you're like, man, we've got time for one cast. I told you we had time for one cast like 5 casts ago. We
Right.
have got to go, or it's going to be very bad. I promise
Yeah.
you. We
The
still have
anvil's
time to
coming
run
and-
it. We still have time to run away from this thing, but barely. Like that's it's just, I don't know. There's just sometimes some things that just remind me of things. But I mean, the whole time that we've been talking, I've been staring at that painting behind you, and just I don't know, man. It's really cool, and I've seen it before, and it was very familiar when I first saw it. But good choice.
Yeah, it's been one of one of the few pieces of art that has stayed with me over the years.
Yeah.
So.
That's cool, man. Well, listen, I really enjoyed catching up with you. It's awesome. We didn't even get to talk about Africa yet, but we're going to have to do that again.
Geez. Africa, the Skiff Challenge, there's all kinds of things.
Oh, man, the Skiff Challenge, too.
Yeah.
That is, you're an animal and a beast at the Skiff Challenge. My God.
I don't know how many. I'm definitely, in fact, it's so funny. I actually just signed the paperwork today. It's been in my inbox for a couple of weeks. I just got around to it. But I don't know how many more years I have in me of doing it. But for some reason, that thing I love it. That thing speaks to me on so many different levels. The guys that we're interacting with on that, guys like Heath and Chris and the fellows over at Key West, the competition of it, what the whole thing's for,
right?
The state I grew up in, the state I was born in, fighting for clean water, and the job that Chris and Daniel are doing over at, Captains for Clean Water. The size of it, in 40 something to fit, the first year that we finished was 50 something hours.
Yeah.
The magnitude, of it, I feel like finally after 2 of them, we've got a good game plan, on this one. We had some bad luck last year. We had a motor blow up on us. Was not Suzuki's fault. We beat the cowling off the back of that motor. And, they don't do well with saltwater intrusion. The last leg before we hit Marco, it was just, it was 3 to 4 feet at 3 seconds on the nose, coming out of the due south as we're coming down the coast. And we beat the cowling off, literally. A lot of folks thought maybe we had taken the cowling off or unlatched it at some point and forgot to. Now the latching mechanism was still locked in there. We literally beat the rivets out of the
I can believe it.
Latching mechanism. And we got to Marco, and right before we came into Marco, I looked over my shoulder, and that motor is louder. I'm not imagining it. And we figured out we had lost it, and what did we do? And we get on the phone. We had a really great, support team on that. And they said, well, we've got a cowling for you in Key West, and that, Marco Island was where we, cut out and make that straight shot, to go to Key West. And man, can we make it? Well, we don't have much of a choice. It's quit with a motor that's still running or go, and be in it. And so we went, and 12, 13 miles out, coming off of it was sporty, and coming off the back of them, and dunked it a few times, and finally lost it. The bad thing about that was we had a plan on that one, a logistical plan and a speed plan and a fuel burn plan, and it was working. We were catching up.
Yeah.
We were a little bit behind in that first half, but we passed Key West. We were catching up to Heath, and then Heath had a real tactical error coming up the coast, off of Canaveral, and we feel pretty certain if we would have been running our race and not broke down, that we would have caught up to him, and it would have been a neck and neck fight for second. Nobody was catching up to Chris Peterson last year, the way they shot out the way we did. So they did, but losing that motor hurt. But man, it's the neatest, in between the fatigue and everything else, to do that entire state, to start in Alabama and to run those beaches, Pensacola and Panama City, and up into that, and all the different environments in the state, that whole Apalachicola Bay and all the oysters, and coming down by Swanee and all that, and then hitting the Everglades, once you leave Marco, and now you're in the Keys, and then you're coming up the East Coast, and you're dealing with Miami, in Palm Beach, and man, can we get offshore? Are we inside, coming up? It's a neat race, man. And I want to give those boys a run for their money one more time this year, and see where we end up.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
But yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. It's
no, it's not for the faint of heart. It's that is, I don't know, man. That seems to be one of the most physical things I could think of doing. It's like, I mean, I've ridden around in a skiff a lot, and to do the entire state of Florida is, that's pretty tough. Yeah. I mean, one of the
time of year you do it, you're gonna take a beating on one side or the other.
Yeah.
It's just pick your poison, bud. Either on the West Coast or the East Coast at that time of year, you're gonna take a beating. That's why last year hurt, so bad. We took our beating. We took our beating all the way to the Keys.
It was
the
all downhill.
It was all downhill from there. And it didn't make it around the corner, but we've got a good team. We've got a great sponsor in C-Pro. It's that race is all about, to me, it's all about, once you get past, why you're doing it, the clean water and all that, but you start thinking about the logistics of that race. That to me is what boats are really all about. Every boat is a compromise. This boat's shallower. This boat rides a little better in a chop. This boat, in skinny water, skinny flat calm water, you're not going to touch Heath,
Right.
In that boat it is, but it gets 3 feet or so, 2-3 feet. And you got a long choppy section, where that C-Pro's got a little bit more of a V to it. That's our happy place, and, so I love it. Neat bunch of guys that I probably wouldn't have had much interaction with, especially, with a guy like Heath or Chris that don't do a ton of fishing. They're too busy building boats, and getting quality boats out to guys like you, that are doing the fishing. So to have a relationship with guys like that are that competitive, but just, man, good guys, hardcore guys.
Hardcore, man.
Savage.
Heath, man, he is a hard worker, dude. He knows. He knows that the hard work he puts in all year long pays off on those 50 hours, because, I mean, I've talked to him a lot about it, and it's like, this is what it takes. If you want to do this, this is what it takes for, that's how he feels. Like, that's how he has to prepare all year long for those 2 days.
Yep.
And
it's one more thing for me. The other thing I love about it is it's one more thing for me that forces me to stay in shape. You know what I mean? I've got my, I do a big mountain hunt every year. I go out west, and we, me and a couple of friends, we pack in with everything on our back for 10 days. And if you kill an animal, you're packing it out. You can't half-ass that. You have to stay in shape. You've got to be in good shape year round. I put my pack on with 50 pounds in it. The 6 months leading up to it more frequently, but even now, a couple of times a month that pack goes on and we put on some big hikes, and I need that in my life. I need the things to keep me in that level of shape.
Right.
Because if not, I'd be fine walking around, maintaining my weight, not looking, not gaining a bunch of weight, but I definitely wouldn't have the cardio. I definitely wouldn't have the endurance that I have right now. That, was the main factor in why I got into martial arts and jujitsu and grappling, so long ago. There is no workout that I can go do that I will push myself to the limit of having somebody that and trust trying to choke you unconscious or trying to bend your arm to the point, that if you don't tap, something bad happens. I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy that's going to go to the gym and I'll go to the gym and I'll do my workout, but it's not going to be to that level. And
unless you find some reason for it to be that level, like that's what I found with the CrossFit thing. And then there's the CrossFit Games, and there are all these competitions, and there are these opportunities to compete either online or virtually or in person. And it's like, okay. And then you see, I keep track of all these workouts, and it's like, okay, I did this a year ago, this exact same workout. And I'm going to do it again tomorrow morning. And there's going to be the same butterflies that I got before I used to wrestle in high school. And it's like, man, I got to show myself that I'm in better shape today than I was a year ago. Can I do that? Like, I'm fighting the clock. I'm fighting everything. And I've been working really hard for this. And so every day is like a competition. Every day is like that. And for me, just like you got to have whatever it is that drives you, man. It used to be the marathon that I had on the calendar, right? Could be your big hunt. For me too, it's the hunt that I do with my boys every fall. And if I can't keep up with them, forget about it, man.
And for me, you just said that, the clock's ticking. That's the biggest motivator for me. My two thoughts on physical fitness at this stage in my life was, one, I wish I was at this level 20 years ago. I wish I had started so much sooner. I've always been in decent shape. I always took care of myself. But 50-year-old Toby kicks the snot out of 30-year-old Toby.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not even a comparison. I'm exponentially stronger. Faster. I'm at 50 years old. I'm in the best shape of my life, and the other side of that is, for me, that clock ticking is, I don't know how much longer I can physically do the things that I love to do. How much longer can I climb mountains? How much longer can I put in a 10-mile hike, with a 5,000 feet, elevation gain? Huh?
You want me to tell you? You want me to tell you how long you can do it?
Yeah.
Until you think you can't.
Right. And that's the mentality behind it, is I don't know how much longer. I don't know when the day is that it comes, but I'm going to fight it tooth and nail for as long as I can, and every year it seems like, especially on my mountain hunts, I'm in just a little bit better shape. And I keep waiting for it to feel like there's a subtle decline, but it's not coming yet. Maybe one day.
There doesn't have to be, man. I'm a little bit older than you, and it's been getting better and better every year, but it gets better and better with more and more work. Like, I have to put in more and more work, but I'm still getting better. But I still have to put in more and more work, and eventually I do know that I will be doing more and more work to stay the same. And then I will be doing more and more work to manage the decline. But for me now, I'm like, well, I want to get as strong as possible. I want to be as flexible as possible. I want to do everything that I can possibly do so that when that decline comes, I'm going to be at a higher level. So I'll have 10 years of decline before I get to back to where I was 10 years ago, right? That's how I keep thinking about it in my mind. That's right. But it's a fight, man. It is a fight. But the mountain hunting and the elk hunting are probably very similar. And my boys and I have this thing that this little inside joke that we say, and it was like, when we were elk hunting this year, I was like, man, every time you think it's going to get easier, it gets harder. and that was just the theme of this hunt, is like, okay, we've climbed up this giant hill. There can't be any more hills, and the elk have to be here. And then you hear a bugle, and you're like,
one valley over.
Damn. They're up there. And now we're going to have to go up and around that cliff line and then here. And just when it seemed like it was going to get easier, it gets harder, all the way to the point where you actually kill the animal. And you're like, wham, we got it done. Awesome. Now we have to carry it out of here.
Yeah. It's and I don't know if you're anything like me, Tom, in this sense, that I have finally figured out that I have to at some point be truly miserable to be happy.
Yeah.
You know, there's this fine line of how bad something sucked, and then when it's over, the feeling that it, you know, that it gives me, you know, the most memorable things that I'm doing in my life, whether it's 54 hours awake, just getting your teeth kicked in, you know, with the Skiff challenge. You know, a couple of years ago, the hardest pack out I've ever had, one of my good friends and hunting partners, you know, drew his once in a lifetime mountain goat tag in Washington State. And I went along, you know, and it was real long story short, about a 15-mile pack out, you know, with a pack somewhere in the, you know, around 100 pounds, steep elevation and going down. And I don't know if you're familiar with rhabdomyolysis.
Oh yeah. I know,
but I gave myself rhabdo.
You did?
Yeah, without a doubt. Coming
down.
You don't
seem like somebody that would get it.
It was a perfect storm, altitude, exertion, not quite enough hydration. How
long had you been off the airplane?
About 10, 11 days, right in there. 11,
That's
12
weird
days.
That you got it,
you know?
Like that.
Yeah, urine looks like Coca-Cola.
Yeah, that is not good. And you were in the backcountry?
You know, it really started to hit and noticed, you know, the issue with my urine being the color that it was, about a mile from the truck, you know, where we had packed out.
Did you go straight to the hospital?
So physically exerting. No, flew home and then went to the doctor. And
did you not know what it was?
You know, she said it was the first case she had seen in her practice. You know,
I've seen a number of people get it, and several of them have been working out with me, which is not, which is not something I'm proud of. But one of my cameramen got it, and you know, he was all we did, man. And this guy, he plays a lot of racquetball, and he's in good shape. And I was like, hey, look, we got in late. Let's go do I'm going to go do a 20-minute workout on the tennis court before dinner. Like, we just got enough time. He's like, I'm coming too. And another cameraman came too. And we were doing these things. I was like, okay, we'll do like, you know, squats, and then we'll jump up on this curb, and, you know, like a box jump, but on this little 12-inch curb. But it was the squats that got him, and I was doing them real fast. Like, I was doing them super fast, like CrossFit style. And and it was like, for, you know, maybe we were doing Tabata, or maybe it was a minute on, a minute off. But he was like, man, I don't do squats like this, you know, at home. And I was like, do them however you want. But he was trying to keep up with me. And anyway, later at dinner, he was like, oh, man, my hip flexors are so sore. I can't even get out of this chair. And we were all kind of laughing about it, right? And I just, in passing, I said, I hope you don't have rhabdo. And he was like, what's rhabdo? And I told him what it was. I said, it's when your muscles break down, and that gets into your bloodstream, and you know, your kidneys can't handle it, and it's really bad news. And if your pee turns brown, you got a real problem. And so he got up in the middle of the night and was like, dude, something's wrong. Tells the other cameraman, and he takes him to the hospital. And he checks him out. He can't figure out anything. He's like, I don't know what's wrong with you. He goes, well, could it be rhabdo? And he goes, how do you even know what rhabdo is? This is a long time ago. And he goes, I don't know. My friend just told me something about rhabdo. And he was like, well, I don't know. Let me check something. And he comes back and he goes, I thought you only got rhabdo from electrocution or crushing injuries. And he goes, man, I don't know. My friend told me this, and he goes, well, your friend did you a big favor here because that's exactly what you have. And I was like, if you only knew the big favor I did him, made him do those squats real fast.
Made him do it. Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
make him do it, but he did it real fast. But it was funny because I think that dehydration plays a big part into someone getting it that would not normally get it. Like you mentioned, dehydration, the perfect storm.
That was definitely a big part of mine.
And when you get off of your program, whatever, like I've seen other people that I know this one guy that got it, and he works out all the time, and he went on a plane somewhere, and then he did a drop in at a CrossFit, and he did a bunch of pull-ups, and he got it real bad. But he does a bunch of pull-ups all the time. And I think that it was the airplane and the dehydration and getting off his schedule, and his electrolyte balance gets messed up. Something gets messed up, and he does the same thing that he would normally do, but he gets it. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's really super
scary. It sounds so simple, but it sounds so obvious. But with extreme physical exertion and altitude and flying, hydration is so important. I had actually the scariest thing that's ever happened to me was 2 years ago. Big hunt up in the mountains, in the Cascades, right on the Canada Washington state border. Just not much game. Blizzard came through a little bit early, so you're thinking it's going to be 40-50 degrees, and now it's snow on the ground and you're having to cover twice as much ground. And I was in good shape, and I pounded the mountain, just from one mountaintop to another with camp on your back. And it was a combination of things. Got really dehydrated, extreme physical exertion. When I finally I got a bout of giardia. I had an issue with the
that could have been a big
with the O-ring on my my water filter. And when I got off the mountain, we drove to Seattle to fly out the next day, and I went to an urgent care clinic for the giardia and got that squared away. Started getting on the the meds for that. And by the time I got to the airport, I was so wiped out, disappointed from a long, hard hunt, that I'd worked for all that time, and physically exhausted. And I had a couple of drinks, in the airport, at the bar there, because by God, I wanted to sleep on that long flight home. And I slept. I didn't move. I woke up in Atlanta, and got off the plane in the position that I fell asleep. And a couple of days later, my calf started hurting me. And it felt like just a bruise, no different. All the martial arts I do and grappling, it just felt like somebody had, kicked me in the leg there, and it was slightly bruised. And it progressively got worse over the course of a couple of days. And I was in the grocery store, and, I bumped into a friend that owned her own urgent care here, member of the gun club, really good friend, but in the medical field. And she saw me limping and in the store there, and oh, what'd you do? I pulled a muscle. I don't know. Well, didn't you just get back from a big trip and flying? I said, yes, ma'am. Okay, well, hope that gets better. And we say our goodbyes, and 5 minutes later she finds me, and comes down an aisle in the grocery store, and she said, listen, I've been thinking about it. You might have a blood clot, a DVT, a deep vein thrombosis. It's classic, this exertion and flying and altitude, and where it's at in your calf, and you need to go to the hospital. No bruising, okay. No visible, nothing you could see. It just felt, like a bad stone bruise, and, I said, okay, thank you. She said, no, I'm serious. You need to go to the hospital for this. And her name's Lori, and she's a wonderful, person. And I just said, Lori, if I went to the doctor every time, I had a sore muscle, I would live in the doctor's office, and she badgered me enough, and just, kept saying things like, this could be life threatening. You need to take this serious. If it is what I think it is, let's rule it out. And finally, she bothered me so much about it, that I said, fine, I'll go to the doctor. And she didn't believe me, and she called ahead. She has, she's in the medical field. So she got me an appointment, for a sonogram. And I went right in that day, and you get in and they squirt the gel on you and they put the sonogram, machine on your calf. And the little girl that was doing it wasn't looking at the monitor 3 seconds. And she said, oh my,
whoa,
I had a massive blood clot.
Really?
Yeah. And it was that perfect storm. I did everything wrong. I got dehydrated from the Giardia, um, extreme physical exertion, dehydration, flying altitude, not moving. I slept the whole flight home, in the same position with my leg bent. Pretty much everything you could do wrong, I did. And that was horrible. It was 4.5, almost 5 months on heavy duty blood thinners.
Wow.
I mean, you couldn't shave. You couldn't, the doctor told me if you nick yourself shaving, you're going to have to come to me to get the bleeding to stop. So
Wow.
everything that I loved to do in my life, my grappling, my jujitsu, everything, hiking hard with a pack, like I couldn't do anything physical, for 4.5 months until that thing dissipated and went away. And it's a big concern for me now. It's why I drink so much water. When I fly, I get up every 15 minutes and I'm stretching like I'm 80 years old, because apparently you're a little more susceptible to these blood clots, once you've had one. So that's a big fear for me.
That's super interesting. I have never
coming home from
heard
yeah
that.
coming home from Africa was a 16-hour flight, and I never got the sleep on it that I think most people would, because I was so scared to sit in the same position. I'm getting up every 30 minutes or so and flexing and stretching and all
So
that.
once you have that, are you more susceptible to getting it again?
They say you are. That's why I'm so, before I fly, a day or two before I fly, I start taking some Bayer aspirin just to, to thin the blood. And definitely staying as hydrated as I possibly can. And there's, nothing.
When you're staying so hydrated, are you paying attention to your electrolyte levels?
Not professionally.
Well,
You know what I mean? If I
if
get
you're
to a
drinking
point where
like
I'm,
gallons of water a day and you're peeing all the time, it's going away, right? So one thing that I've been looking at lately is like how I feel when I replace the electrolytes, because I drink a ton of water also.
yeah,
But I've been
I have at
replacing.
least one. I'm a big fan of liquid IV.
Mhm.
I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah.
those. I drink at least one of those a day. If it's a day, if it's an off day that I don't work out, which doesn't happen very often, but if for some reason with work or I'm offshore fishing and I don't make it to jujitsu, or I don't, my garage is padded wall to wall, and there's a old guy wrestling club, grappling club, that we roll in my garage 2 days a week. And if for some reason I don't make it to one of those workouts and I don't get that extreme sweat on, then I might not have one. I might just drink my water, you know what I mean? But pretty much every time I work out, I'm going to have one of those liquid IVs. And I've definitely noticed a difference. I'm a little concerned because I haven't put that much effort into studying it yet. Can you overdo it? I don't know. I've heard anecdotal stuff about friends drinking a little too much of them and then they got a kidney stone and they think, but it's anecdotal.
I think you need to ask the doctor and get blood
Yeah.
work done. I mean, I think that's the only way to tell. And maybe it's urine. Urine can tell you. I don't know, but yeah, I would definitely ask a doctor and get that test done of either the blood or the urine, whatever. But the electrolyte levels, from what I can tell, that is when they're right, you feel right, and when they're off, you do not feel right. And I think that you could have them either way. I don't know if you can have too much. I don't know. I'm careful about having too much. I do it with, just by feel and by taste, or like if my sweat is like really stinging my eyes, then I think I better drink a lot of water because I feel like I've got a lot of salt in my body, right? So let's purge it. But then this is like the most bro science thing that anybody's ever said ever.
Right.
But then when I'm really super, like all through the summer when I'm sweating like crazy, then you're sweating fishing all day, and then you work out again in the afternoon and you're sweating even more. I'll do 2 of those electrolyte things, right? Like I'll drink like 1.5 gallons, 2 gallons of water when you're doing that. But I like to sweat a lot. I've got a sauna in my house, and I get in that probably 3 or 4 times a day. So if the sweat's stinging my eyes, I don't know. I drink way more water. If it's not stinging my eyes, then I put more electrolytes in there. I have no idea.
I'll tell you how I found those. How I found those liquid IVs. I was cramping up a lot diving. When you're diving, even if the water's not that cold and you're just wearing a really light suit, just a 1 mil, almost a skin, just to keep jellyfish from stinging you and stuff like that, you still sweat in those, and you don't realize it, and halfway through the day, you're at 70, 80 feet, you've made 20, 30 dives, and you're coming up and your calves, or your thighs are starting to cramp. And it's a real issue when it does happen, because it's a mental issue for you. There's no question that even just worrying about something while you're free diving increases your oxygen use.
Sure.
You know what I mean? If you're in a real Zen state and you're almost meditative and you're not, worried about, the sharks around you or the current or whatever it is, you definitely have a longer, breath hold. So when you're coming up and your thighs are cramping and you look up and you still got 50 feet to go, you know what I mean? So I got fairly serious about that. It was one of the few things in my life that I didn't just suck it up and, tough through it,
Right.
And ended up finding that liquid IV. And from the first day of drinking them, pre-diving, the difference was incredible.
We obviously needed it.
Yeah. I haven't cramped up, while diving in a couple of years now.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I've just never had a problem cramping. I don't know. Maybe it's just, you never know. I don't know what it is. Just certain habit, or like a certain amount of salt on my food, or what it is. I don't know, but I just don't cramp that much. But
yeah, well, God knows you're putting forth the physical, you've got the output.
There's the output. There's not a problem with the output. The problem is the recovery. I need more. You run out of hours in the day, because now I need to, if I up the output, then I have to sleep more, and sleeping more. I can only go to bed so early. I mean, my wife she already rolls her eyes and can't believe that I'm thinking about going to bed at 9,
7 o'clock. Yeah.
Anyway,
the hours in the day thing for me now, it's funny. There's literally not enough hours in the day to do the physical stuff that I want to do. I want to get my hikes in, God, that takes time.
Yeah, it does.
To put on a heavy pack and go put in that 5 miles with 40 or 50 pounds in your pack. That's an hour and a half, 2-hour commitment. And you find yourself getting up earlier to do it, around your work, around your trips, around everything. And then, I don't want to lose my grappling strength, so I find myself, I'm in this position where, perfect world, I'd probably work out 8-9 hours a day right now if I didn't have to worry about jobs and, and other things going on.
Yeah. But, with the hiking and backpacking and rucking and stuff like that, and when I was working on the getting ready for the Go Ruck selection, I just had my phone with me and some headphones, and I'd just do all that, and I'd talk to people on the phone. Like, I get all my business calls done while I was doing that. And you just got to figure out a way that you can do like 3 things at once, because I don't know. Whenever I'm on the phone, I just walk around in circles anyway. So why not put a backpack on and walk 5 miles?
Put some AirPods in and go do it.
I do. I don't know what it is about me on the phone, but I just walk around in circles in the driveway, and my wife looks out there and is like, "What?" I look at my phone. It's like at the end of the day, it's like, you did 38,000 steps today. It's like, man, it was a big day on the phone. It was a big day. I talked to a lot of people on the phone. Anyway, hey man, listen, it's been 2 hours and 12 minutes. This is one of the longer ones we've ever done. I know, it really does.
Really?
We got to do it again because there's so much more to talk about. I'd love to talk about the Skiff challenge. I'd love to talk about your Africa trip and just overall all kinds of stuff. But it's been awesome catching up with you.
Really good to talk to you too, man.
Yeah, man.
I think about you often. I think about the paths that our lives took and our careers took, after meeting each other, and all the different avenues that you can go down with fishing. Yeah. Where fishing took you, where fishing took me. And I think that's the neatest place about where I'm at in my life right now, having had a career in the fishing industry and brought up a lot of kids. I've got a lot of guys that mated for me, that are now captains, and they've gone their path. And for some of them, that path is in Alaska every summer. And for some of them, it's, they never leave Central America. They've just made it a year round, and some of them it's in the Bahamas. And I'm at that neat place in my life now where, by no means do I have, walk away and don't work any more money, but I can afford to jump on a plane a few times a year and go see these guys, and it's not like booking a trip to Alaska where you're worried about airfare and somewhere to stay and booking a charter, and it's pretty much a plane ticket.
Yeah.
And go jump on a boat with a good friend that can't wait to show me their fishery and teach me some stuff, and show me things. And some of the things I love, some of the trips I love the most now are going and mating for somebody that used to mate for me.
Nice.
And, and learning their fishery, learning the little things that they've picked up, the subtle little things over the year that make a big difference, in their fishery, and getting to play, a little bit more and having a little less responsibility. I love being in the cockpit now.
That's fun, man. You're just kind of, I don't know. You hear about people say it's like being a kid again, or it's like, when you're learning something and then you go back and you do it slightly different. Now you're doing all these things as the mate where you were the captain before, and it's a totally different experience. Like in a lot of ways it's just the same, in a lot of ways it's completely different, but it just like getting in the water again and spearfishing is you're spearfishing for these fish that you had fished for, but it's this whole different experience, a place that you had been to a whole bunch of different times, but you're just experiencing it differently, and that can open up this whole new learning opportunity for you, which keeps things interesting and exciting. That's what it's all about, man. Just like we were talking about. As long as you're having fun, do it.
Without a doubt.
Do it.
Without a doubt. Yep.
All right, dude. Hey, listen, thanks so much for being on. I appreciate it.
My
and
pleasure,
if
Tom.
people want to find you, where do they go?
Easiest way is probably through my Instagram. It's the word water and hunter, 71, water hunter 71 on Instagram. You get to watch all the craziness, from Africa to spearfishing the next day to climbing a mountain to who knows what's next.
Nice.
So,
all right. Well, we'll tune in and see what's next.
All right. Sounds good. Good talking to you,
All
Tom.
right, man. See you.